Activity and Cultural Circle. Before we begin, just a gentle reminder that all sessions will be recorded. We ask that you keep your videos and microphones off during the session. Today, I will be introducing Deyowidron't Teri Morrow, who is the Wolf Clan from the Haudenosaunee Cayuga Nation. They are a registered dietitian working in their home community of 6 nations of the Grand River in southern Ontario. Teri is a wellness and nutritional consultant at Ogawaya Dodog Ishto. It aligns our body where they provide frontline clinical nutritional support for patients and organizations dealing with chronic disease management and prevention. Teri specializes in Haudenosaunee food sovereignty and cultural practices, and has worked coast to coast in food science research, governments, and Indigenous dietetic support alongside the Ministry of Child and Youth Services, Breakfast Clubs of Canada, and Dietitians of Canada in the Indigenous Nutrition and Knowledge Network, amongst others. Today, Teri Morrow will be presenting Haudenosaunee food systems and spiritual strength.
Gano, Nyawa, you did a really great job there. Really great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it's always nice to hear the attempt. It's beautiful. So Deyowidron't niwa sanoden watasioni ni wagashoten gaikono niwa quinziden agogweni. My name is Teri Morrow. I'm a registered dietitian from 6 nations of the Grand River. Cayuga Wolf Clan. And I've been a registered dietitian for a little over 10 years. I am the chair of the Indigenous Nutrition Knowledge Network, Information and Knowledge Network of Dietitians of Canada. So I've been really lucky to have mentors throughout my time in school, and just kind of moving forward to be able to actually support mentees has been amazing. Today, I'm going to just share a little bit of that experience that I've gained over the years of working in different areas of dietetics. I've worked in clinical care, community care. I've worked in food production management. And then again, I've really incorporated a lot of my Haudenosaunee teaching and cultural understandings into my dietetic practice as well. So what my presentation is called is Natogan Yonto Kogwatni Goha, and that's a Cayuga, this is Cayuga language I'm speaking as well, which means so be it in our minds. And it's really something that we want to be able to bring our minds together when we meet like this. When we come together, we want to make sure that everybody is considered, that they're valued, respected, and honored. And that's what this statement is usually mentioned after we say something to one another, or when we have, our Thanksgiving, when we talk about things that we're really grateful for. And then we say collectively, Netogani Ontoko Gwatni Goha. Close that. So I just shared, again, the language has become a very important aspect in my dietetic care for myself, for my family, as well as, my patients and my clients. Nutrition is central to our Haudenosaunee lifestyle. It's really how we enact our ceremonies. It's how we give thanks and acknowledge just being grateful day to day. So having that as an understanding and learning more after I finished my dietetic training has really changed the way that I look at applying my dietetic practice. And the Ongwayat Dato Gesto is what I call my dietetic practice as a whole. So it means it aligns our body, and it's food, water, and medicine. And medicine can be anything that really helps to support our spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical health and wellness. And so it's a really bigger aspect in the whole realm of my teaching. So Deyowidron't is what I said, when we come together and we talk about the things that we're thankful for in ceremony, and it's also something that we teach our children in our community. It's typically said at the beginning of and ending of daycares. So when the kids go to daycare, when they go to school, this Thanksgiving address and how we are thankful for all that Creator and creation has shared with us is really something that's taught as a cultural value set. So I'll just share with you in my language, and then you can kind of read the English version underneath of what I'm saying. Dane and Watrowi sent for Wednesday. Dwanoha de Dwanokwa. Make what tot state ni ha. Make deep ne and do a hake. Guego de Totanahonio. Make to Ganyo and Toko Guatni Goha. So again, it's referring to our mother. Nandan, you can go then up with the house, you'll find white to go awado. May hand by hand cat tot to go a diso songwa, we don't know hanyo. May, oh, we sat gano, without donyo. Make deep may, and we hate, he shot, Scott, and Wayant, or Botany Goha. Scott, they what to know honyo. May to ganyo talk, Botany Goha. This is again just talking about creation. Donnie and Watrowi, Hudai Hudanyo, touch ne, ge, se, na Hawaii, na he, ne deep ne, and we hate. Scott, the Atino honyo, may to ganyo and talk, Botany Goha. So the assigned performers are the beings that have been asked and put here by Creator and creation to really just look after the living environment that we're in. Dani and Watrowi said Wakawane, Squanyadayo, Oihohwane, a touch wadza, ne, dosa high twant twatse, na sound wahe, or handle. How we nisha den yonge, ne deep ne, and we hake, they said Wanahonyo, said Wakawane, Squanyadayo, ne to Gani on top of Guatni Goha. The leader, so Handsome Lake has a story attached to his being and his essence and who he is as a leader for our people. Sorry, that was my son. So Handsome Lake has been, in an individual sense, I think it's somebody, again, that we always assign people a position and positionality about really being able to be a part of creation as a whole and holding the same good values that, you know, our leaders were able to carry forward and to share with us. Dane and Watrowi get Nyokodagi Hadio Yapyono, Nate Dio Kiate Miado, Gano Dwano Donyo, Nate Di Ne, and Dweheg Diatino Honyo, Hadio Yapyono, Dio Kie Miado, Nitoganyo, Toku Botany Goha. And anytime we talk about our health and wellness and well-being, we also have to look at the living environment, of course. And our people also have like larger beliefs and just what we see in front of us. Like there's a whole spiritual essence and spiritual beings that you know, when we pray to and we, you know, take care of these beings in that essence, that's really what we're being mindful of. And we know that our love and compassion for these beings has always sustained us as Haudenosaunee people to be able to continue for thousands of years on this continent and to live with the environment in that way because of these spiritual beings. Dane and Watrowi, how hunge gal hide hanal grace square diso. Nate tot sando, Nate scano adona donyo. Nate di ne and we he they said when a honyo, gal hide hanal grace square diso. Nate to ganyo toko guatni goha. I don't know, make that smaller. Again, so just talking about the Creator, again, there's that representation of the heavenly skies, which means like in the universe above us, is really what we're giving honor and thanks to. a lot of the things that we did in our ceremonies and with our teachings center around where the stars sit, and how we look at where the moon and the sun is sitting in the sky, and all of those things contribute to creation as a whole, to ourselves, and to, again, the living environment that we're in. So Dani Tony got Gweni Ige Agayake Hanyok Dani To. So this, for myself, the way that I just spoke to you now too is really like one of the kind of simplest type forms of, like, it's like maybe a grade school level. I'm not a fluent speaker at all. And I've worked really hard to regain language. I am an intergenerational residential school survivor, so language was not something that was shared in our home. So to be able to pick up language and be able to say these words very confidently and to understand, as well as to be able to share, is really an impactful thing. Like, it really lifts my heart to be able to do that, because it's not something that I could do even, I would say, 5 years ago. So to be able to have language and to use language and to connect language into what I do as a dietitian, which I've been studying and working for over 10 years, is really an important aspect of my wellness and my care for myself. So the cycle of seasons is really important to our people as well. And this is what I mentioned when we talk about giving thanks to the Creator. We're acknowledging the universe and the stars and the heavens above, anything that's, up above us, gives us meaning and different value for what we are to be thinking of at certain times of the year. So we've named the English kind of very quick translation, but I know a lot of these words have translations that they're not very English-like. So I've put the way that we would translate the word from our understanding of the universe and our language and that context, and then I put like in the bracket is the very English type translation, and they're very different things. So Gaya Dagowa, which means the month of the big doll, that's when we have those spiritual beings in our community that they travel what's called house to house. They go and take care of just the living environment, the healing vibration that's carried in and around our homes, our personal homes. And when we used to do this as Haudenosaunee means the people of the long house, which means that multiple families from each clan, like the wolf clan, would live in those very long houses, which, the very, very big ones, like you could look in the history books and see. But we live like in our own singular houses typically today. Sometimes many families live together, and sometimes it's just a single family in a home. So we do still do this, which we call house to house, kaya tagowa. And those beings, those spiritual beings, are asked to come and bring in very good medicine in that way, like I said, good vibrations. So they'll come through the house and they'll sing and they'll dance. And there's multiple. There could be up to 15, there could be 20. It all depends on, who's available at those times to come out and do those responsibilities for our community members. And again, we're very mindful of that being at that time of year, not because it's January and it's, year one and the new year. It's because we know we've come from a place of rest, and we've come from a place of, typically at that time, some kind of maybe strife because of long winter months. We've overcome, hopefully at those times too, the challenges of maybe not having full access to a lot of nutritious type foods, or even fresh, fresh meats, very hard to find. A lot of the animals are resting at that time too. It's very difficult to get out. We can ice fish and things like that, but you're never always guaranteed enough. So we do, dry and ration a lot of the food up until that point, but we're always very grateful at that time of year because we've been able to survive another winter. And some people even mention that it's like, instead of saying it's their birthday, it's like we've seen another winter, or another trip around the sun or the moon, because that moon's 13th cycle has ended then, and it's renewed then. So that kind of for us is, again, how we kind of described what actions, like those are physical actions, and it's physical activity, right? You have to go house to house. Six Nations has a population of over 30,000 in our membership, and we've probably got, I would say, maybe 4,000 to 5,000 homes. So it's a big responsibility. There are 4 different longhouses on Six Nations that take care of these responsibilities. Like I said, there's different individuals that go to the different longhouses, but then they go from the longhouse, they go to the individual homes and spread this medicine. The singing and the dancing is all different vibrations again, breath control, physical activity, all of those things were an important part of healing. The breath that's shared at that time, the breath that's brought and the vibration that's brought into the house is a healing breath, and it's a healing vibration. And that's what those spiritual beings, they're the big dolls, that's what their responsibilities are to us. And we have the responsibility to care for them as well throughout the year and give them acknowledgement. And in that responsibility we give thanks for them again in our Thanksgiving address. Every single day that we wake up, we say that address. We're always thankful in those ways, and we're always giving thanks to these beings that would do these actions and responsibilities for us. So that's just one example, but I mean, the rest really talk about, like, February, they say it's like Gunrastakya. That's rustling leaves. So again, we don't call it February. We know that the winds have picked up. And we know when the winds pick up that things are really going to be moved. It's time that the earth is kind of doing a sweep in a way with the winds. And that was another one that we thanked, when I said that the ones that carry those responsibilities for the creator, the winds are one of them. And they come in and they clean a lot of the debris, right? They take any kind of loose limbs, things like that, which is good, because at this time between February and March as well is when we're going to put the taps in the trees. We're going to start tapping the trees. So we welcome the winds. We give thanks for the winds because they're, doing that duty. So when we go into the woods to tap the trees to get that nutritious maple sap, it's typically the maple trees that we tap, and we call the maple tree the leader, because that's what our people knew of the most efficient tree that gives the highest sugar content, with the way that we would, typically we're cutting other trees and doing that really hard work to get the wood to make the maple syrup. Today, a lot of us use like those big vats or like propane and things like that, or gas stoves. So it's not always done in the same old way. But again, when our ancestors did, because you can tap any tree that pulls water from the earth, you can tap, and our people did that. And each tree will give you different nutritional qualities. plus it's different labor intensive, because if it has more water content in that tree sap, you have to use extra energy from your own body as well as from the earth material, right? Which is basically the wood and that you're using. So through trial and error and thousands of years, our people knew and gave this leadership value to the maple tree. You know, of course, Canada has adopted it. It's on the flag and that, but it's because of that. It's the first big ceremony that we have that honors food in Haudenosaunee country. Like, that's really important to us. And again, we're Six Nations, so we're like some of the first ones that were in contact with, you know, the settlers in the New York area and that when they first came here. So those types of things were shared with them. And actually, you know, the maples have that nutritional quality in it that it actually helps to pick up your immune system going forward when you're going to go start working into the next month. So those were real paths to responsibilities, the way that our people named the seasonal cycle of when these foods were available to us. And you can see, like, from each one of these months, there's a food value that is actually shared with us at that time. And with that food becomes that responsibility of work. You know, physical activity is completely tied to these ceremonies in all aspects. It's just not as plain and simple as grabbing a skipping rope or lifting a weight or going, you know, to the gym. It has a full set value that includes culture and nutritional intake at the same time. So again, this continues to show how throughout, you know, our people thought very clearly about when we needed to rest, when we needed to boost our immune system. You know, we called October Saganagowa. It's the big cough month. And we know that, like, we know that October, November into, you know, sometimes even December, that those times there's a lot of illness at that time. And again, our people were preparing our food from the August, September month into October. If we were still lucky to harvest at that time, we were harvesting our squash and our corn, our beans, all very high nutritional value to support, you know, a long-lasting immune system going into these months that we knew were months that were primarily when people would pick up illness or pick up sicknesses at this time. So I really like this. I don't know if anybody follows Thich Nhat Hanh. The Art of Communicating is a wonderful, it's even an audio book if you don't have time to read or enjoy sitting and reading a book. But this really speaks well to, you know, what we're kind of talking about as our environment becomes really important when we look to physical activity and we look to nutritional aspects of living well. Nothing can survive without food. Everything we consume acts either to heal us or to poison us. And we tend to think of nourishment only as what we take into our mouths, but what we consume with our eyes, our ears, our noses, our tongues, and our bodies is also food. The conversations that are going on around us and those we participate in are also food. Are we consuming and creating the kind of food that is healthy for us and helps us grow? When we say something that nourishes us and uplifts the people around us, we are feeding love and compassion. And we speak and act in a way that causes tension and anger, we are nourishing violence and suffering. So, so I've been, as a dietitian and a community researcher, really fortunate to be able to work with the First Nations Food, Nutrient, and Environment Study. It was done coast to coast. So there's definitely data on the website, on the fnfnes.ca website for BC as well. The information that I have, I worked here in Ontario and I worked on the East Coast as a nutrition research coordinator on it. But what we did was just kind of look at food sovereignty from an Indigenous perspective. So I guess the definition is that, you know, it's a typical policy type approach. Indigenous people and impacting the Indigenous people and our ability to respond to our own needs for healthy, culturally adapted Indigenous foods, and the ability to make decisions over the amount and quality of food we hunt, fish, gather, grow, and eat. So in here in Ontario, we and the Haudenosaunee have specific agreements with the Ministry of Natural Resources, so the MNR around here, which is the Ontario Ministry, and our clan mothers and chiefs, our traditional governance, have made agreements with them to enact, you know, what's known here as Indigenous food sovereignty, but to our people, it was our ceremony, right? Like I said, we give thanks to all these foods, these animals, these plants, the waters, the land, every day. So it was something that we culturally lived by. But in discussion with the MNR, they had to understand that our people have always known when we needed to hunt and fish, and we didn't need to be regulated by the Ontario standards in that sense of what and when and how much you could have access to, because they don't have our data for our, you know, communities. They don't understand how often we use these different foods in ceremony or in our diet at all, because we're not a part of any of the larger, I guess, Canadian type surveys or studies and things like that, because we're on federal land. Nobody's required to do any of those Canadian type studies that feed into actually understanding and setting policy and pieces like that. So because we're a federal responsibility, and that's a provincial organization with the MNR, their regulations don't necessarily apply to the Haudenosaunee people as you know, kind of sovereign people and having a relationship prior to with a federal government, as opposed to before this provincial government existed. So we do have our own food sovereignty system here in Six Nations that does respect when we can hunt and fish, and we use our clan mothers and our chiefs to help advocate for that. And this study again looks at different aspects of food sovereignty. So what it did, kind of in the communities, we looked specifically at with this First Nation food nutrition environment study. We wanted to ask people, but this is the first of its kind too. It started in 2012. And we wanted to ask people what kinds of traditional and marketing foods, market bought foods, are people eating? And that was through a household questionnaire that took a little bit over almost an hour to be completed. So house to house here on Six Nations and others. There was like 15 other First Nations too down here. And then in Ontario. What contaminants, if any, are in the traditional foods, and are the traditional foods safe to eat? So we did also ask in the communities, in the different nations, we asked them to bring us a small sample of their traditional food that they eat, and we will send it to the lab to look for any potential contaminants that may be harmful. So we get an understanding of the impact of the foods that are being eaten in the community and the surrounding area, the environmental impact around the area where hunting and fishing, gathering takes place. We also looked at the water. So, you know, most First Nations have chosen to have their reserved for their use only land put close to waterways, right? That's our life source. And the water, we always have some concerns as more towns and people have popped up around it, and agriculture's popped up around a lot of First Nations, and you know, has been moving into the waterways and the water system, a lot of contaminants. So We're looking at water sampling for any trace metals in the water, so surface water sampling for pharmaceuticals as well. So we did it in two ways. That one, the water that we live by was sampled at different areas. That's the surface water. And then the trace metal one we did specifically in people's homes. So anybody that said yes, that they would be a part of the questionnaire, they were also offered, can we also do a sample of your drinking water here that comes out of your tap that you're using? So some did, and then it was opened up to other members in the community as well that wanted to know about their water too. Because these studies, are, like, to do those lab tests is really, it's expensive. So a lot of people really did want to know, and they wanted to have it done. So what we found from this study as well, that some of the current nutrition concerns for a majority of First Nations is typically vitamin A, calcium, vitamin D, and iron deficiency anemia was also another high concern in many of the First Nations. Some of the diet-related concerns that we found as well in the majority of the First Nations was obesity, diabetes, heart health, and poor dental health. So this I talked about too, just in kind of, you know, in the healing ceremony of connecting in with, you know, the big heads when they go house to house and they take that good breath and energy and vibration to the homes and do that together. So when we do our dances and we do our activities, these are things that even in ceremony at our longhouses here are done. So these are often more commercial today too. Like there are powwows and things like that that are a little bit different. There's still very great aspects to share culture and physical activity and our foods and all of those things. They've stemmed from, in Haudenosaunee territory, they've stemmed from actual ceremonies at the longhouse. Like I said, when those cycle of ceremonies are done, there would be typically a dance and food and songs that are shared at each one of those ceremonies. So we collectively, we get together and we give thanks for, if it's the trees and we're doing the tapping, we're giving thanks at that time, but then we're dancing together, we're singing together. And sometimes some of these songs that we sing, they could be 45 minutes long. Like we will dance for 45 minutes together as a group. Like that creates such a connecting vibration, and just the breath work as well, right? Like we dance for at all ages, everybody gets up, like it's the whole house is moving together. So it's, you know, the game of lacrosse as well it's a ceremony sport. Like it's actually played as part of a ceremony at the longhouse as well. And that's kind of where it got its start from our point of view as Haudenosaunee people, is that was you know, something given to us, just like these dances and these foods from the creator. And we still do that today, where there's just at the longhouse that game is played, but it's at a very high commercial level today. Like, you know, it's at a national level today as well. And it's something that, you know, a lot of people do participate in for physical activity, but its origin, just like those dances that you see there, they've originated from a cultural and spiritual practice. And sometimes, you know, it's really important not to forget that part of where that has come from, even though it does many times have a higher representation from a commercial type sense of, you know, sharing culture and sharing, you know, activity and entertainment with others. It's rooted in a spiritual practice and ceremony that was given to the Haudenosaunee people by the creator. So this is, you probably have to Google this, but again, it's another option in a way to kind of teach different language modalities, I guess. This one here is in Mohawk language. This was what I put together before I had a very good a better understanding of Cayuga language. Like I said, I haven't been studying or able to speak that well for that long. So I did have connection with Mohawk speakers prior to me working as a dietitian. I'm also a yoga instructor. I don't know as much as I would love to know about the yoga aspect itself. Like, to me, it's in that same sense that, you know, the powwow for myself as a Haudenosaunee means, and lacrosse at national level means, is that it's more of a commercial. I know it has that same spiritual value and sense, and I use it as Ogyo Wishra Hioso. I use it like that it strengthens our breath in a way to make sure that people understand your breath work is, again, everything's foundational to your being. Like, that's when, you know, the Creator first gave us that breath into our bodies. It was to awaken, you know, our being, our who we are. And when those medicine, those big heads go around, that's what they blow, you know, their breath. It's a healing breath that's giving, you know, because, and like I talked about the wind, it's a huge movement and respectful acknowledgement of being able to take that breath every single day. So I connected this breath work with language. It's on Working It Out Together is a APTN. It was a show that was on APTN. It talks about physical activity and healthy eating, stuff like that. But they asked me to do this yoga piece for them, and I shared that. So there's a link here, but I'm not gonna jump out to play it just in case it kind of messes everything up. Okay, so again, just going a little bit back to the research part of the study again, you know, participatory research is really important for any time that you're connecting in with First Nations and you're doing work with them. You know, back in the 1950s and before, even in the 90s, there has been some concern with, you know, just people, even like quite honestly, even in the 2000s sometimes, where people still have the thinking about coming in and trying to, you know, potentially save or help or affect First Nation in some way, shape, or form without really understanding that specific First Nation's need. Participatory research really helps to respect that space of nation-based needs, because like I said, there's a population here on Six Nations of over 30,000. You know, there's other First Nations that are very close to us. They speak different languages. They don't speak our language. They have a different cultural value set as well of ceremony. So it's really, you know, hard at the research level to look through a lot of the data, because a lot of it says Indigenous now, or it previously said Aboriginal or First Nations, and it doesn't really give or split out, you know, the people and in that way that they really need to be acknowledged. So it really gives that sense of self-determination, their very cultural distinctiveness, and again, their own dignity to represent what it is that their nation specifically needs, as opposed to what was in some of the research material that says typically First Nations need A, B, and C. Well, maybe, but there's 650 First Nations. Which ones need what of that and how much of it? So we really need to encourage this type of research to take place more, and they need to be more nation-based and specific for that reason, because each First Nation gets its own funding agreements with the federal government. It has its own connection with the provincial governments as well. And if we can't speak in those exact terms of what they need, it really misses the opportunity to inform people. So again, this was just some of the Ontario data of the number of people that did participate in that study. And it was only Ontario First Nations. Some kinds of the traditional foods that we noticed in Ontario that were eaten, the top ones were deer, traditional Haudenosaunee corns typically, which are white corns. It's not the yellow corn in the grocery store. Different types of beans, perch, and walleye. And then the top store-bought foods when we did the 24-hour food recalls were soup, vegetables, fruits, pastas, and different cereals. So we found too that in Ontario, there was only about 3 teaspoons a day or 1 1/4 cup of traditional food that was eaten of traditional food only that was eaten in the communities. So some of the major risk factors, again, that we found was, diabetes and heart disease. Of course, it's not, our people aren't, just diabetic. I frustrates me a little bit because it's, as a dietitian too, that's a lot of the programming that I've had to work in is, it was very diabetes centered when I knew that it had to be more cultural centered. It had to look at our spiritual value sets as well, right? Because that's who we should be identifying as first, that, if we're not able to provide culture, spiritual wellness, then, we're at risk for all types of dis-ease. And, I know these are always the top 2 as of right now, but that's not our people. Diabetes, I think, has been around since the 30s or so. Our people have been here for thousands of years. And in that sense, we've done a lot more time being well and being healthy, and being those spiritual beings that our ancestral people have passed on to us, and these ancestral beings have passed on to us. And that's really who our people are. So it's just, it's in a lot of, again, this is a lot of the research materials, but the more I said, the more that our people participate in this, we're going to ask questions about spirituality. We're going to ask about ceremonial dances and things like that. It's just because the other people that did the research, they don't know about that stuff and they weren't asking those questions. So once we start working collectively together, we'll get more information. And then the next time, I show something like this, it'll say risk factors that, we didn't do our February cultural ceremonies and we need to bulk those up. So let's go and do that more, right? Let's be more spiritual at this time, so we don't have these other issues. But currently, what I always have a lot of concern with so much money being put into diabetes care and to, supporting diabetic prevention programs and things of such, is that a lot of people still didn't even know. 17% is pretty high for not knowing whether they had type 1 or type 2 diabetes. So there's still a lot of work in that area too, even in those programs that exist. And most of our communities have some sort of diabetes program in it. So just making sure that they're supported thoroughly to provide, the best education possible, that they can link in and, even virtual connecting in with people that can help to support that, because not everyone can really afford or bring in, dietitians and nurses and all those people part of teams. So again, it's just another area that we can advocate for. So some of the barriers to eating more traditional foods was lack of time, lack of knowledge. It's quite difficult to access, government restrictions, having a lack of hunter, and then again, a lot of industry and farming around our First Nations. So presence equals production, using technology as different ways to support and educate people on any research or any activities that we're doing in the community. I know a lot of people post when things are happening in the community. A lot of cultural knowledge keepers share and post different ceremonial, not specific ceremonial, but when and why we're doing these things in kind of a little bit more of a vague term. You don't get the full essence unless you're there and participating. Like I said, you're sharing breath, You're sharing vibration, you're sharing food, and you're sharing movement with a group of people. That is a spiritual practice, right? That's your spirit that's being fed at that time. So just technology has been able to really engage a lot of other people that have not been able to really connect in that way. So again, residential schools, like I said, for myself, I'm an intergenerational survivor. It's definitely something that has impacted not only the ceremonies, the language, but the food and the physical culture around the food as well has been, you know, a real impact in how I do my practice as a dietitian and how I engage and communicate with my patients. So this is, yeah, again, some of the major issues that I make considerations of is, you know, that a lot of the children were not given enough, you know, food and clothing. And again, if they're not comfortable, it's not a comfortable environment to eat. When they're overworked and they're, you know, not treated as if they're children creating a relationship with food, but they're more treated as they're responsible to tend to or produce food that typically didn't even end up on their table. That's again a mentality of a lot of, you know, my family, myself, and my clients that I work with. So that's actually my mom with the white headband in the front there with the glasses. That's at the Mohawk Institute in Brantford. So again, we also know too in dietetics, I do a lot with Dietitians of Canada to educate and make them aware of food experiments that have been done on the children while they were in school. There is a lot of work that talks about, you know, from the work that Ian Mosby's been able to share and really pull out of the hidden history of the Canadian. You know, that's what Ian was doing. Ian was looking through just, you know, as a Canadian food historian, that's where he was looking, and he happened to come across these things. And if he didn't find that in there, I'm not sure that it would have really been given the impact that it has and the acknowledgement that it has, because Ian has been talking about this for, I don't know, well over 15 years I've known him, where I've heard him talk about this. We had discussions with him from, you know, Indigenous Nutrition Knowledge Information Network as well about the impact, and that's where it kind of all stood, you know. And he was really, as a white man, he was kind of ostracized for bringing this type of information out and forward, and you know, it wasn't as welcome back then. So yeah, so he's really a pioneer, and so grateful that it was done, uncovered by him. But again, I mean, we've learned so much about really what has been happening at those schools, and how it still impacts us and our families today. So again, those types of experiments really did contribute into regulations and committees and different procedures. These are some of the specific ones, because those things were done to our people and other people, marginalized people typically. The Canadian Institute of Health Research has guidelines for research involving Aboriginal people. The Tri-Council Policy Statement, or the Ethical Conduct for Research Involving Humans, PCPS, Chapter 9 of that speaks specifically to Indigenous people. And then we also, First Nation people also have ownership, control, access, and possession. The First Nation Indigenous Governance Center supports that stating that any research or data that's collected or done on or with our people belongs to those nations. The specific nations that you're working with own that outright. Even if the university is paying or being paid to collect it, they do not own that data. And those are the types of agreements, regulations, and procedures that are being put in place today because of those types of things that were done to our people previously. There's just more pictures of family members at residential school. So when we did look at traditional food, again, it improves our diet quality because a lot of the foods are typically higher in zinc And zinc helps to support growth and maintenance of your body through vision, immune, blood clotting, thyroid function, and wound healing. Higher in protein with our meats and our fish and our beans. Cellular growth and maintenance. Protein is supporting those actions. And iron, iron deficiency anemia was one of the higher concerns in First Nations. And again, it's a component of your red blood cells and helps to carry that oxygenated breath throughout your body. So our traditional foods have higher amounts of vitamin D in them as well. And that was one of the other vitamins that throughout First Nations, if we could eat more of our traditional foods, we would meet that one of those requirements as well. So less iron deficiency anemia, less lack in vitamin D and A. Vitamin D helps us absorb calcium and maintains healthy bones and teeth. You also saw that there was more dental health and problems that they recognized too with First Nations. It helps muscles and nerve and immune systems work properly. And then vitamin B12 and B6 are needed to keep nerve and blood cells healthy and for proper brain development. And it also helps control your blood glucose, your weight, blood pressure, and different cholesterol and triglycerides. So these are some just examples from, if you go on Dietitians of Canada and search INKIN, INKIN, you'll be able to be connected to the Indigenous Nutrition Knowledge and Information Network. And there are some free resources on there because I know, there's less than 30 Indigenous dietitians across Canada, and we have over 650 First Nations that each nation cannot have a dietitian in their community, but everybody has the right to access a dietitian. All First Nations have the access to dietitians as well. So that for the network purposes, I've tried to have any resources that are created to be free links and accessible, because I know most community health reps that are responsible for, most dietetic or even nutritional practices in First Nations, when they don't have access to dietitians or nursing support, they really have to go it on their own. And, there's not enough money to join Dietitians of Canada, or even my network is only $35 there, but you have to join the bigger network of Dietitians of Canada first to join the other network. So it's not always accessible to everybody. So I do try to put as many free resources and links. And again, we're always open to networking and connecting in to anybody that has questions or needs nutritional support, because we have that network on Dietitians of Canada of over 4,000 dietitians working coast to coast. So that's my presentation, Trace. Thank you so much. Sorry if I took a little bit more time. I don't know where we're at. I'm in Ontario, so I've been waiting all day, confused of the time. I hope you all really enjoyed the conference, and thanks. I'm available for any questions or anything.
Great. Thank you, Teri. Oh, maybe I'll turn my camera on so everyone can see me. Thank you. I just wanted to double check if anyone had any questions or comments. All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. And I just wanted to thank everyone for attending this valuable presentation. We'll be switching to the next session in just a couple minutes. So you're welcome to stay in this breakout room. Next up, we will have Dr. Tricia McGuire-Adams and Lori Buffalo. And the main room will have Dr. Brian Rice. So we'll see everyone back for 3:30